My name is Clara Mitchell. I am 33 years old, and tonight should have been the night every dream I carried as a little girl finally came true. The lights, the applause, the weight of a national award in my hands, everything looked perfect. But the moment I glanced at the seats reserved for my family, the truth cut through me. They were gone, choosing to stand beside my younger sister instead of me. Pride twisted into something sharp and hollow. As I stepped off the stage, an industry legend pressed a cold brass key into my palm and whispered words I could not forget. My phone began to buzz over and over until the screen filled with dozens of missed calls. In that instant, I knew the celebration I had imagined was only the beginning of a story I never expected to live. A story of betrayal, survival, and the kind of family no award could ever promise, but one mysterious key might unlock. I could feel the stage lights warming my face as I walked toward the podium, the crystal edges of the Apex Award catching the glare and sending fractured beams across the ballroom. My name had just been called Clara Mitchell, winner of the year's most coveted recognition in brand design, and for a split second my chest swelled with pride. 33 years old, finally standing where I had dreamed of standing since I was a girl, sketching logos in the margins of my notebooks. But when I glanced toward the front row, the place where my parents and siblings should have been seated, all I saw were empty chairs with their name cards neatly propped against untouched glasses of water. The sight pulled me back down, the applause surrounding me suddenly thin, almost mocking. People were clapping for me, yet the only claps I had ever longed to hear were missing. I tightened my grip on the heavy trophy, forcing a smile for the cameras as if I could freeze the moment into something it was not. At the microphone, I delivered the words I had rehearsed for weeks. Thanking my colleagues at Vision & Co., acknowledging my mentors, giving credit to the clients who had trusted me with their brand. My voice was steady, clear, but inside I was breaking. I had written a line about my family, how their sacrifices paved my way, but the words died before reaching my lips. I could not bring myself to thank people who were not there. The applause rose again when I finished, and I bowed my head slightly, wishing the stage would swallow me. After I stepped down, cameras flashed, hands reached for mine, congratulations poured in from strangers and peers. My colleagues hugged me. Sophia, my director, pressed her hand on my shoulder and whispered that she was proud. For a moment, I let myself lean into that warmth, but my eyes betrayed me, drifting back to the vacant row. The disappointment sat heavy in my chest like a stone. I slipped toward the edge of the ballroom, clutching the award against my hip, needing air. Near one of the tall windows overlooking Manhattan's skyline, I felt a presence. An older man, silver hair swept neatly back, dressed in a perfectly cut suit, stood beside me. His posture was upright, his eyes alert with a kind of sharp kindness. "Beautiful view," he said, softly nodding toward the glittering city beyond the glass. "Yes, it is," I replied, still holding the award close as though it might fall if I loosened my grip. "You handled yourself well on that stage," he said, his voice carrying authority without arrogance. "Your work has an elegance most designers never reach." I turned fully to face him, and recognition hit me. Harold Bennett. The Harold Bennett whose campaigns from the 70s and 80s I had studied in school. My breath caught, and for a moment I forgot how to form words. "Thank you," I managed, finally, stunned that he knew who I was. "That means a lot coming from you." He smiled, faint lines crinkling around his eyes. "You deserve tonight. And you will deserve much more if you stay true to yourself." He slipped his hand into his pocket and drew out an antique brass key, the kind you would expect to find in an old townhouse door. He pressed it into my palm, cool and unexpectedly heavy. "Welcome home," he said with quiet certainty, then placed a small card on top of my hand. There was an address in downtown Manhattan scrawled neatly across it. "Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. I opened my mouth to ask what this meant, but when I looked up again, he had already moved back into the thinning crowd with surprising agility for a man his age. I stared down at the key, its ornate teeth catching the ballroom lights, and for the first time all evening, I felt a tremor of curiosity instead of pain. The vibration in my clutch snapped me back. Pulling out my phone, the screen lit with a cascade of missed calls. 66. My mother, my father, Daniel, Emily, their names stacked on top of each other. Dozens of text messages filled the notifications, urgent words spilling across the screen. Call us. Where are you? We need you right now. I stood there frozen, the crystal trophy in one hand, the brass key in the other, my phone buzzing angrily between them. Pride, disappointment, and dread collided inside me, swirling into something I could not yet name. The applause still echoed faintly behind me, but all I could hear was the silence of those empty chairs and the unanswered demands blinking red in my palm. I slipped my phone back into my clutch, my fingers trembling as if the weight of those unanswered calls could burn through the leather. My chest tightened, and suddenly standing in the glittering ballroom felt suffocating. The lights, the polished marble floors, the people laughing with glasses of champagne in their hands, all blurred. My mind pulled me somewhere else, somewhere I had never really left. Boston. The old brick house on Chestnut Hill where the windows rattled every winter and where discipline lived in every corner. I could see my father Robert at the dinner table, his hair dark then, his jaw firm, reading the evening paper while my mother Margaret passed out plates of roast chicken and mashed potatoes. He hardly looked up when I placed my report card by his elbow, the paper trembling in my little hands. Straight A's again, award stamped with golden seals, teacher comments glowing. Daniel, my older brother by 3 years, slid his card onto the table right after mine. His grades were good, not outstanding, but my father looked up, then folding the paper with an approving grunt. Nice job, son, he said, giving Daniel a firm nod. My mother smiled warmly, already planning how to share his progress with the neighbors. My paper lay untouched, its sharp corners curling under the condensation from his glass of whiskey. Emily, the youngest, was always the star. She would come in with her hair in ribbons, carrying a half-finished watercolor of a flower or a participation ribbon from a dance recital. Everyone applauded. My father lifted her in his arms, spinning her gently, declaring that she had talent, that she would be someone special one day. The word special clung to her like perfume, thickening the air in every room she entered. Me, I was smart, hardworking, determined. But in that house, those qualities were invisible. Invisible in the way my mother only asked Emily how school was going. Invisible in the way my father saved his best suits for Daniel's football games, never for my science fairs. Invisible in the way our living room walls were lined with Emily's framed drawings and Daniel's trophies, while my medals sat stacked in a shoebox in my closet. I remembered one night more vividly than the rest. It was winter. I was 14, snow piled against the windows. I had just returned from the state spelling bee with a silver medal around my neck. I walked into the living room glowing with pride, expecting at least a smile. Instead, I found my parents in mid-argument with Aunt Valerie, my mother's sister. Valerie was fiery, independent, the kind of woman who spoke her mind. She had just announced that she was moving to California to pursue a career in social work. My father leaned forward in his chair, his voice cold and sharp. You're abandoning family for a job. That is what people like you do, Valerie. You run. Valerie's eyes burned as she shot back. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm choosing myself for once. Not all of us live to be chained by approval. I stood in the doorway, my medals still cold against my chest, and realized no one had even noticed I was there. The conversation grew louder, my father's accusations echoing off the walls. Valerie left that night and never came back. Her absence became a warning in our house. My father used her name like a slur whenever someone dared to question him. Don't be a Valerie, he would mutter under his breath as if independence were a disease. I think about that now and wonder if what he feared most was a mirror. Because deep down I always understood Valerie. She chose herself, and maybe that was why I remembered her so vividly, why the memory of her slamming the front door still felt like thunder in my bones. The years blurred after that, a carousel of being overshadowed. Daniel got praised for internships he barely scraped through. Emily was showered with love for college art shows that were little more than doodles on canvas. I graduated valedictorian, and my father's toast at dinner was half-hearted at best, overshadowed by Emily's acceptance into an art program no one had even heard of. Each moment stacked on the next until the pattern was undeniable. It wasn't in my head, it wasn't a fleeting oversight, it was the way things were. I remember once, after winning a national design competition during college, I came home with the certificate rolled neatly in a tube. My father asked me to pick up Daniel's suit from the dry cleaner instead. That night, Emily announced she had been accepted to display her work in a local gallery, and my parents threw her a party. My award stayed in its tube under my bed until I moved out. The ache of being unseen grew into a scar I carried everywhere. Even standing on that grand stage tonight with the Apex Award heavy in my hand, I felt the old wounds split open. They hadn't come. Just like all those years when they hadn't looked, hadn't clapped, hadn't cared. I leaned against the window frame of the ballroom, now clutching the key Harold Bennett had given me, the old brass edges pressing into my palm. The weight of it felt strangely grounding. Maybe it was because Harold had really seen me in a way my own parents never had. That key was more than metal. It was recognition. It was belonging. The phone buzzed again in my clutch, a reminder that the same cycle had followed me into adulthood. 66 missed calls was not love. It was a demand. They needed me not because they had been proud of me, but because I had value only when I was useful. The realization sank deeper than it ever had before. Favoritism in my family was not a passing mistake. It was a law written and rewritten over decades, carved into every dinner table conversation and every empty chair at my victories. For the first time, I did not push the thought away. I let it settle sharp and undeniable until I could almost hear Aunt Valerie's voice in my head warning me not to chain myself to their approval. The ballroom noise dimmed around me. My heart beat steady and slow, as if preparing me for something I could not yet name. The crystal trophy gleamed in the corner of my vision. The key rested firmly in my grip. My phone buzzed again, but I let it ring, staring out at the New York skyline where the city lights blinked back like they were daring me to finally choose differently. I walked out of the hotel into the cool New York night, the city humming with its usual indifference, and for the first time I felt a strange kind of clarity pressing against the ache in my chest. It carried me back further than the lights of Manhattan, back to Rhode Island, where the first steps away from my family had begun. I was 18 when I stepped onto the campus of the Rhode Island School of Design, clutching 2 suitcases and a stack of sketchbooks so full of ink that the pages curled. Providence felt foreign and alive, the air salty from the nearby bay, the streets lined with brick buildings that seemed to whisper that I had finally broken free. I remember calling home that first night from the dorm hallway phone, my voice shaking with excitement as I told my parents about my professors and the studios, the smell of paint and paper thick in the air. My father's reply was measured, almost distracted. "That's fine, Clara. Just make sure you don't waste your time with hobbies." My mother's voice drifted in after his, already asking how Emily was adjusting to her high school dance team. So I stopped calling as often. Instead, I poured myself into work. I spent nights hunched over drafting tables until the sun lit the windows. My professors pushed me harder than I thought I could handle, but I thrived on it. Every project was another chance to prove that I could turn ideas into something tangible, something undeniable. I lived off coffee, granola bars, and the fire that told me if my family would not applaud, I would learn to clap for myself. It was during my final year that I won the National Student Design Competition. My typography piece hung in a gallery in Chicago for an entire month, and strangers walked by reading words I had pulled from the air and set into form. It should have been a moment of triumph, but when I called home, my father asked me if I had remembered to send Emily a birthday card. I learned then to stop expecting their recognition. I learned to make my own. After graduation, I packed my things and boarded a bus to New York City, with $200 in my checking account and a heart that beat like it had something to prove. New York was loud, dirty, alive, and merciless. It welcomed me with subway delays, overpriced walk-ups with peeling paint, and a sense that the city didn't care if I made it or disappeared. But in that indifference, I found a strange kind of freedom. I landed an internship at Vision & Company, a branding agency that sat high above Madison Avenue with glass walls that reflected the skyline back onto itself. I was 22, running errands, brewing coffee, and staying late to watch the senior designers layer colors and shapes into campaigns that made ordinary products feel untouchable. I stayed quiet, observed, and when no one was watching, I sketched my own ideas. I remember one night staying past midnight rearranging a campaign draft they had discarded. By morning, Sophia Clark, the creative director, stopped at my desk. She was tall, her gray streaks elegant against her black curls, her eyes sharp enough to slice through pretension. She held my mock-up in her hands. "Did you do this?" I thought I was in trouble. My throat tightened as I admitted I had. She smiled, not warmly, but knowingly. "Then you're not here just to make coffee." From then on, Sophia became my anchor. She threw me into projects others thought were too ambitious for an intern. She told me when my work was sloppy, when my vision lacked courage, when I was hiding behind technique instead of leading with voice. More than once, I broke down in the bathroom after her critiques, but I always came back sharper, clearer. She saw something in me and, unlike my family, she said it out loud. Years passed like that, each season marked not by birthdays or holidays at home but by campaigns launched, clients won, and nights staring out of office windows at the Empire State Building glowing across the river. By 29, I was promoted to creative director. My name was printed on the door, my salary finally enough to move into an apartment where the ceiling didn't leak when it rained. Sophia once sat across from me in her office, her hands folded, her voice calm. "Clara, you have to learn something no one else can teach you. Family can shape us, but they cannot define us unless we let them. Don't let them decide your value." I wanted to believe her, but the scar of neglect was stubborn. Even as I signed contracts worth millions, even as my designs appeared in magazines, there was a part of me that looked back over my shoulder, waiting for my parents to finally see me. That was why tonight mattered. The Apex Award wasn't just a trophy. It was the highest recognition in our field, the kind of honor that made newspapers and alumni magazines and hometown announcements. I told myself that if there was ever a night they would show up, it would be this one. As the months led up to the ceremony, I sent them the invitation twice, reminded them again on the phone, careful not to sound desperate. Emily had just unveiled her latest art installation, and my parents flooded Facebook with photos of her standing beside abstract swirls of paint, beaming as though she had just reinvented the world. Daniel posted about his promotion at the bank, and they gushed as if he had been handed the keys to the city. Me, I waited quietly for them to answer the only question that mattered. "Will you be there?" Tonight, staring at the skyline with the award still gleaming in my hand, I had my answer. The chairs had been empty. Their absence was louder than applause. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the hotel window, remembering Sophia's words. "Don't let them decide your value." Maybe she had been right all along. Maybe this award wasn't a key to their approval. Maybe it was a key to something else entirely. The thought lingered as I slipped the trophy carefully into its velvet case. The brass key Harold had pressed into my hand earlier felt heavier now, its meaning still unclear. My phone buzzed again and again in my bag, but I ignored it. For once, I wanted the silence. I wanted to feel what it was like to stand in my own victory without begging anyone to see it. The city outside glittered untouchable and alive. And for the first time, I realized I was no longer that girl waiting in a Boston living room with a report card in her hand. I was here in New York with a trophy that had my name etched in steel. Somewhere inside me, a small voice whispered that maybe this was the night my family had finally lost their hold. 2 days before the Apex ceremony, my phone lit up with my mother's name across the screen. I almost let it ring out of habit, out of the instinct that nothing good ever followed her calls, but something in me still wanted to believe. I pressed accept and lifted it to my ear. Her voice carried that clipped Boston sharpness that always made me straighten without thinking. "Clara, we need you to understand something. The whole family will be back in Boston this weekend. Emily is being honored as Realtor of the Year for 2023, and it is very important that we are all there to support her." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. I was standing in my office, sunlight slanting across the sketches taped to the wall, the Apex invitations still pinned above my desk. My chest tightened. "Mom, you know the Apex ceremony is this weekend. It's not just another event. This is national. This is the highest recognition in my field." There was a pause, then the sound of my father's voice in the background, low and certain, before he took the phone. "Clara, you can manage fine on your own. You don't need us there. Emily does." This award is a big step for her business, for her reputation in the city. She needs her family's presence more than you do. The word struck me like a blow, clean and sharp. My breath caught. I could see Emily in my mind posing in front of staged suburban houses with her wide smile and glossy hair, shaking hands with local developers, her photo already on billboards scattered across Boston. Realtor of the Year. A local plaque handed out in a banquet hall, while my own award represented the entire country, the apex of design, the thing I had chased for over a decade. I tried again, my voice breaking despite my best effort to stay calm. Dad, this is the apex. It is national news. My professors will be there, my colleagues, industry leaders from across the country. This isn't just about me, it's about everything I have worked for. He did not soften. His tone was measured, almost dismissive. You will be fine. You are always fine. Emily needs us more. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles whitened. Fine, I was always fine. The child who colored inside the lines while Daniel forgot his homework and still got a pat on the back. The teenager who collected trophies that no one attended to see. The adult who was always told she would be fine because she knew how to take care of herself. I wanted to scream through the line. Instead, I heard my mother return, her voice smoother, as if trying to settle me into compliance. Clara, please understand. Your award is very prestigious, we know that. But family is about being there when someone needs you. Emily's career is still new, fragile. She has worked so hard. We cannot let her stand there without us. The silence stretched. I swallowed the burn in my throat. So, that's it. That's it, Clara, she said gently, almost like a lullaby. You will shine no matter what. Emily needs us more. The line went quiet, then the call ended. I stood in my office, staring at the phone in my hand, the hum of New York outside my window suddenly too loud. My reflection looked back at me from the glass, my eyes rimmed red but dry, my shoulders squared like I was bracing for a storm that had already passed. I sat down and scrolled through my calendar. The Apex Award at the Grand Liberty Hotel, New York City, Saturday night. Emily's Realtor Banquet, Boston Marriott, Saturday afternoon. Not even the same kind of scale, not even close. Yet, in my parents' eyes, her event eclipsed mine. That night I walked the city streets aimlessly, the neon bleeding onto the pavement, people brushing past without a second glance. I told myself I should be used to it by now. I told myself it should not matter anymore. But each step pressed the truth deeper into me. For years, I had convinced myself that if I worked hard enough, if I earned high enough, if I proved myself loudly enough, they would come. But they had chosen. They had always chosen. When I returned home, I sat in the dark, the Apex program lying open on my table. My name was printed in bold alongside the finalists. My photo smiled back at me, confident, triumphant. I touched the page with my fingertips and whispered the words they would never say. I am proud of you. The words caught in my throat, but they steadied me. I knew I would walk that stage whether anyone sat in those seats or not. I knew the cameras would flash, the names would be announced, the applause would come even if my family turned their faces toward Emily instead. Still, the hollow ache would not let go. It curled inside me as I closed the program and set it aside, the echo of my father's voice repeating in my mind. You will be fine. Emily needs us more. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I could already see the empty chairs. The lobby of the Grand Liberty Hotel glittered with gold fixtures and polished marble, every step echoing like it knew this night was meant to be remembered. Couples in gowns and tuxedos swept past me, their laughter carrying upward to the chandelier that sparkled like captured stars. I clutched my clutch tighter, wishing for once I had someone's arm to hold onto, someone to walk me in so I did not feel like the odd shape that did not fit the pattern. Inside the ballroom, the tables gleamed with crystal glasses and flickering candles. My colleagues from Vision and Company were already gathered near the stage, their families beside them, chatting, smiling, fitting into the picture so easily. I heard my name from across the room. Clara. It was Sophia Clark, my mentor, her silver hair swept into a graceful twist, her dress understated but commanding in its elegance. She moved toward me with a warmth that eased something in my chest, at least for a moment. She looked behind me as if expecting a crowd to follow. "Where's your family?" I forced my lips into a curve that did not quite reach my eyes. "Travel mix-up. They could not make it." I said it quickly, smoothly, as if it were true. Sophia studied me for a beat too long, then touched my arm gently. "You deserve to be celebrated, Clara. Do not forget that." The words should have been enough. Still, when I looked around and saw fathers pouring wine for their daughters, mothers fixing their sons' ties, siblings snapping photos on their phones, I felt the familiar sting. I crossed the room and found my seat near the front. The placard spelled out last names of families seated together. Mitchell. A row of 6 chairs, all for me and all empty except the one I lowered myself into. The ceremony began with a swell of music. Speakers rose, stories of struggle and triumph filled the air, applause followed each one like a tide. My heart pounded harder as the list narrowed, the anticipation tightening around my ribs. When the announcer finally said my name, the room erupted. "Clara Mitchell." The words echoed above me. My colleagues clapped, some stood, voices called out my name with pride. The applause grew, rising to fill the vaulted ceiling. I stood, legs trembling, and walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavier, every smile I returned practiced, careful. And then I saw it. The row marked Mitchell. 6 chairs, all empty. I climbed the steps to the stage, my pulse thundering in my ears. The host placed the Apex trophy in my hands, its weight solid and gleaming under the spotlight. Cameras flashed, catching my face, catching my trembling fingers curling around the base of the award. The audience kept clapping, kept cheering, and I forced my smile wider, my head higher. To them this was victory, triumph, success. But inside I felt a hollow space growing deeper. I imagined my mother's face if she were here, my father's nod, Emily's careful smirk, Daniel's lazy clap. I imagined them all, but the reality was silence, only silence. I lifted the trophy, slightly acknowledging the applause, my voice catching when I began to speak. "Thank you. This award means everything. Years of dedication, long nights, the belief that design can shape how we see the world." I paused, scanning the crowd, seeing hundreds of faces shining back at me, none of them my family's. I swallowed hard and continued. "I am grateful for every mentor, every colleague, every friend who believed in me." The words ended faster than I planned. My throat closed around the lines I had rehearsed, the thank yous meant for people who had chosen not to come. The audience rose again, a standing ovation, and I stepped back, clutching the trophy like it might anchor me to the stage. When I returned to my seat, Sophia leaned over with a proud smile. "You did beautifully." I nodded, forcing air into my lungs. The trophy gleamed on the table before me, catching the candlelight, reflecting it back like fire. Its weight pressed into me until I almost wanted to set it aside. This should have been the night we shared. This should have been the proof they could never deny. Instead, it was me alone, surrounded by strangers, carrying both pride and shame in equal measure. As the ceremony wound down, laughter and chatter filled the ballroom again. Families embraced, posed for photos, planned after-parties. My phone buzzed against my palm, the same relentless string of missed calls lighting up the screen. 66, all from the same names I had longed to see in those seats. I held the phone and the trophy at once, one heavy with glass and crystal, the other with demands and explanations I was not ready to face. For a moment I just sat there, the noise of the room fading into a blur, the candlelight trembling across the empty row beside me. The apex was supposed to be my family's moment too. Instead, it was proof of what I had always known but never wanted to admit. Some victories you carry alone. I rose slowly, the trophy still in my hand, and slipped out of the ballroom into the quiet hall where the air felt colder. The echo of applause still lingered faintly behind me, but it was the silence of those chairs that stayed pressing against my ribs with every step I took away from the light. The carpeted hallway stretched long and quiet, lined with gilt mirrors and paintings that stared back at me with indifferent eyes. My heels clicked softly as I tried to steady the tremor in my hands, the trophy's weight digging into my palm. I had almost reached the elevator when a voice deep and familiar called my name. "Clara." I turned and saw Harold Bennett leaning against the wall near the side entrance. His frame looked smaller than in the photographs that hung in design studios across the country, but his eyes burned sharp alive. He stepped forward, his cane tapping against the marble floor, and offered a smile that carried no pity, only recognition. "You carry yourself like someone who has fought harder than the rest." I felt my face flush, uncertain if I should thank him or brush the words aside. He extended his hand, not for the trophy, but for me. When I shook it, I noticed the weight of something pressed into my palm. I looked down and saw an old brass key, cool and worn with age. Attached to it was a small folded card with an address written in neat cursive. I blinked. "What is this?" Harold smiled, deepened lines around his mouth creasing with quiet amusement. "Consider it an invitation. Not everyone is offered a seat at the table. I think you have earned one. Welcome home." Before I could ask what he meant, he had already turned, cane striking rhythmically as he disappeared down the hall. I stared at the key resting against my skin, the address catching in my mind like a thorn. Why me? What table? What home? The phone in my clutch vibrated again, sharp and insistent. I pulled it out, the screen glowing with 66 missed calls, all from my family. My stomach twisted. I scrolled through the messages, each one more urgent than the last. "Call back now. Emily needs you." It repeated again and again. No congratulations, no apologies for not showing up. Just the same demand, the same urgency, like I was a tool to be used only when things turned bad. I leaned against the cold wall and let the trophy rest at my side. My thumb hovered over the call button, my chest tightening. I imagined Emily's tearful voice, my mother's command, my father's impatience, Daniel's indifference. I had waited all my life for them to need me, to see me, but this was not what I imagined. I walked toward the side exit, pushing open the heavy glass door. The city air rushed in, cold and bracing, carrying the smell of rain on concrete and exhaust from the line of waiting cars. The lights of Manhattan glittered sharp and endless, but I felt suspended in the space between choices. A driver in a dark coat raised a hand to me, mistaking me for a client. I shook my head and kept moving down the sidewalk, the brass key clenched tight in one hand, the phone buzzing in the other. I thought about calling. I thought about ignoring it. My mind swung between guilt and defiance, a pendulum that never seemed to settle. A message popped up again. "Call us, Clara. Emily is in trouble. She needs help." I bit down on my lip until I tasted copper. Trouble. Trouble meant chaos, and chaos always demanded sacrifice. Theirs. Mine. I stopped at the corner beneath a flickering street lamp, the trophy weighing my arm down, the key pressing into my palm. The night should have been mine alone. Instead, my family's voices rattled inside the device in my hand, pulling at the old wound that had never healed. For the first time, I realized that their absence at the ceremony was not an accident, not a mistake. It was their choice. And now, as always, they reached for me only when it served them. The brass key caught the light as I turned it over in my hand. A doorway, a place, maybe an answer I had not expected. My phone buzzed again, relentless. I stood at the corner with the weight of everything pressing against me, pride in one hand, obligation in the other, and a mystery that whispered promises I could not yet understand. I finally pressed the screen and lifted the phone to my ear. The city noise thinned, and for a moment all I could hear was the sound of frantic breathing on the other end. Then Emily's voice cracked through, high and panicked, and the sobs came so hard I thought she might choke on them. "Clara, everything is ruined." They laughed at me. "Do you hear me?" They laughed. I stood still under the street lamp, the brass key digging into my palm, the trophy heavy against my hip. "What happened, Emily?" She was gulping for air, her words spilling over each other. The video froze in front of everyone. They tried to restart it, but then clips of some stupid meme played instead, people snickering while I stood on stage. Then my speech, someone must have switched it, my words came out jumbled and people booed. The press was there, cameras flashing. I closed my eyes, the echo of her humiliation strangely vivid. It got worse. She dropped her voice to a whisper. "There are articles already about one of my condo projects. They say contracts weren't signed properly. A client is threatening to sue. Mom says it's a nightmare. I heard another voice, then sharp and commanding my mother's. Put her on. Before I could answer, Margaret's voice filled the line. Clara, this is your fault. If you had stepped up and helped Emily with the event, this would not have happened. You know design, you could have handled the visuals, the presentation. Instead, you left her vulnerable. Her words cut through the night like ice water. I swallowed hard. Mom, I had my own event. You knew that. Your sister needed you more. She is the face of this family now. Do you understand how damaging this is? She cannot recover from this alone. You need to come back and fix it. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at the screen as if the words could be seen there. My family's voices had always demanded, never asked. Even now, not a single word about the Apex Award, not a single acknowledgement. Just blame, just expectation. Emily came back on, still crying. Please, Clara, just drive up tonight. I can't face them all tomorrow without help. I let her voice tremble into silence. My eyes fell to the trophy I had set on the edge of a planter beside me, the glass reflecting the streetlight in fractured patterns. It should have been the symbol of everything I had worked for, the proof that all the late nights, the years of struggle meant something. Instead, it stood there ignored, overshadowed once again by Emily's disaster. I thought of Sophia's words that family does not define value, that recognition comes from the work itself. I thought of Harold's key and the strange promise in his eyes. Margaret's voice returned sharp, final. If you care about this family, you will come. I almost laughed, though it came out more like a breath that hurt in my throat. If I care about this family. As if years of being invisible had not already answered that question. The line went quiet, waiting. I pressed the phone tighter, my pulse heavy in my ears. For the first time, I realized I did not have to rush. Their urgency did not have to dictate my movement. I could sit here all night if I wanted, and the world would not fall apart. A cab slowed near the curb, its headlights washing over me, and the driver leaned out asking if I needed a ride. I shook my head, but I lingered on the idea of moving forward instead of back. I placed the phone on the planter next to the trophy and stared at the two of them side by side, obligation and achievement, each demanding a different version of me. The night air pressed cold against my cheeks, steadying me. I picked up the trophy, first letting its weight settle into my arms again. The key slipped into my pocket, warm now from my hand. The phone buzzed once more, the screen glowing insistently, but I did not touch it. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the pull to run home. Instead, I felt the faintest shift, like a tide turning, leaving me standing on solid ground while their chaos churned somewhere far away. I walked until the city swallowed the noise of my phone and left only the rhythm of my footsteps on the pavement. The slip of paper Harold had pressed into my hand earlier that night felt warm from being clenched too tightly. The address was written in neat block letters somewhere in the West Village. My cab ride was quiet, the driver humming softly to a jazz station while I stared out the window at rows of townhouses that looked older than the country itself. When we stopped, I stepped out onto a cobblestone street where the lamps glowed amber and the storefronts looked asleep. The building in front of me was narrow but tall, its bricks weathered, a brass plaque beside the door reading, "The Collective." My fingers tightened around the key. I hesitated, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. My family's voices still rang in my ears, demanding, blaming, pulling me back to Boston. Yet here I was standing in front of a locked door that promised something entirely different. I slipped the key into the brass lock, turned it, and heard a click that felt almost like an answer. Inside, the air smelled faintly of turpentine, coffee, and wood polish. The hallway opened into a vast space, ceilings high with exposed beams, walls covered in canvases, sketches, and screens glowing with digital renderings. The floor creaked under my heels as I walked further, my eyes catching on a suspended installation made of glass shards that seemed to float like frozen rain. Voices drifted from the back, lively and warm. I followed them until I stepped into a large common room lit by hanging Edison bulbs. People gathered around long tables cluttered with notebooks, laptops, scraps of fabric, and half-finished sculptures. They looked up when I appeared, and a woman with silver hair pulled back in a loose bun broke into a smile. "You must be Clara Mitchell," she said, walking toward me with outstretched hands. I'm Eleanor Price. Harold told us you might come tonight. Her grip was firm and grounding, her eyes kind but sharp with intelligence. I nodded, trying to steady my voice. Yes, I'm Clara. Another figure rose from a stool, a woman with dark curls and paint on her jeans. Lucia Torres, she said, grinning. I saw your campaign for Haven Cosmetics last spring. The one with the interactive billboards. Genius. Heat crept to my cheeks. Thank you, I managed. A tall man in a tweed blazer leaned against a column, his accent tinged with Dublin. James O'Connor. Your Apex project was on everyone's lips this week. The layers of heritage in your design, the way you carried narrative through visuals, it was stunning. My throat tightened, the kind of praise I had ached for my entire life now landing so casually in front of me. From the far corner, a younger man adjusted his glasses, sketchbook balanced on his knee. Kenji Sato. Your typography work is meticulous. I learned from it in school, actually. I laughed lightly, the sound surprising even me. I had never imagined my work might ripple into the lives of people I had never met. Eleanor gestured toward the long table. Come sit with us. Harold spoke highly of you. This is a place for people who live and breathe ideas. No competition, only collaboration. I lowered myself onto a bench, the wood cool beneath my palms. My eyes swept across the faces around me, strangers who knew me not as a daughter overshadowed, not as the sister always second, but as an artist, a creator, a peer. We talked for hours. Lucia showed me her murals, bold explosions of color that covered entire city blocks. James shared a project restoring historic typefaces from old Irish newspapers. Kenji flipped through his sketches, delicate lines, building cities of imagination. They listened when I described my Apex project, not with envy or dismissal, but with genuine curiosity, asking how I approached each challenge. At some point, someone set down a steaming pot of coffee and a plate of pastries, and laughter filled the room. I realized I was leaning in, my shoulders relaxed, my voice stronger than it had been in years. Eleanor raised her cup. To new beginnings, she said softly, eyes meeting mine. The words landed deep. My vision blurred, tears stinging before I could stop them. I pressed my fingers against the rim of the cup, blinking hard. For so long I had waited for my parents to say those things, for my siblings to look at me the way these strangers did now. The recognition I had begged for, the validation I thought would only mean something coming from family, had found me here in a circle of people who had nothing to gain from flattering me. One tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it quickly, embarrassed, but Eleanor only touched my hand lightly. You're home now, Clara. I looked around at the crowded table, at the sketches and half-built dreams scattered across it, and felt something inside me loosen. For the first time, I realized that belonging might not be given by blood but built by choice. The room hummed with the quiet sound of pens scratching, pages turning, soft conversations, sparking new ideas. I sat among them, my trophy resting on the table at my side, no longer a lonely symbol but a bridge to something larger. The city outside was still the same, cold and unrelenting, but inside those walls I felt a warmth that family had never managed to give me. I exhaled slowly, almost afraid to disturb the moment, and let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found where I was meant to be. I stepped off the train in Boston with the Apex trophy tucked carefully in its velvet case. The winter air cut sharp against my cheeks, and the familiar skyline felt heavier than it had in years. Every visit home carried the same knot in my stomach, but this time there was something else too, a quiet steel I had not brought with me before. The Mitchell house stood just as it always had, brick and proud, with shutters painted a dignified navy. My father's car gleamed in the driveway, polished as if it had never seen a storm. I rang the bell, though I still had a key. The chime echoed inside, and a moment later my mother opened the door. Her eyes scanned me quickly, cool and assessing, then slid down to the case in my hand. Clara, she said flatly, stepping aside. Inside, the living room was warm but tense, as if even the walls were braced for conflict. Emily sat on the sofa, legs crossed neatly, her hair curled into glossy perfection. Daniel lounged in the armchair, scrolling his phone, while my father stood by the fireplace with his hands tucked into his pockets. You took your time, Emily said, without looking directly at me. I set my bag down by the door. I came as soon as I could. Her laugh was sharp. As soon as you could, you were busy parading around New York with your little award while this family's reputation burned. My chest tightened, but I didn't answer right away. I walked further in the case, heavy at my side. My mother folded her arms. Your sister was humiliated, Clara. Reporters digging into her contracts, whispers of fraud. Do you understand what that does to our family name? Daniel finally glanced up, smirking faintly. But, hey, congrats on the trophy. Emily's voice cut through again, colder. That trophy means nothing compared to what I lost last week. Realtor of the Year is about honor, about standing for something bigger than yourself. Not some flashy industry trinket. I swallowed hard. My instinct was to shrink, to let their words bruise me the way they always had. I could already feel the old rhythm beginning, me silent, them relentless. But my hand shifted against the case, and I remembered the way Eleanor had looked at me, the way Lucia and James had leaned forward with genuine admiration, the way Kenji had thanked me for inspiring him. So I placed the case on the coffee table and unlatched it. The lid opened with a soft creak, revealing the Apex trophy, its crystal facets catching the lamplight until the room filled with reflected fire. This, I said, is what you dismissed. This is what you left behind in New York. The room went silent. My father's jaw tightened and my mother's eyes flickered, though she masked it quickly. Emily leaned forward, her face pale for a second before hardening again. Do you really think that matters here? She hissed. One award does not erase years of being irrelevant to this family. I looked at her steadily. Maybe not. But it proves I was never irrelevant to the world outside this house. Daniel let out a low whistle, almost amused, though he said nothing more. The silence thickened. I could hear the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. For once, I did not rush to fill the space with apologies or explanations. I let it stretch, let the weight of the trophy gleam between us. My mother finally spoke, her tone softer but edged. You should not mistake attention for respect, Clara. These things are fleeting. Family endures. I met her eyes. Family endures only when it chooses to. The words hung there, heavier than the crystal in front of us. Emily scoffed and reached for her phone as if to dismiss me entirely, but her fingers trembled slightly. My father cleared his throat, shifting his stance, though he did not speak. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, the trophy steady in front of me, and for the first time in my life I felt the balance tilt, however slightly. Not enough to call it victory, but enough to know that silence was no longer my role in this house. I leaned back, exhaling slowly, and let the quiet settle like dust in the room. My father's voice cut through the silence, low and sharp like a blade. You sit there acting like a victim, Clara, but the truth is you have always been selfish. Always chasing your own achievements, your own recognition, never thinking about what the family needs. Heat crawled up my neck. Selfish. That word had followed me my entire life like a shadow. I gripped the edge of the sofa. You want to talk about selfish? Do you remember my high school graduation when you left halfway through because Emily had a piano recital across town? I walked across that stage, looked out at the audience, and the seat where you were supposed to be was empty. My mother straightened but said nothing. My father's jaw flexed. That was years ago. And my first art exhibition in Providence, I pressed on my voice, shaking but strong. I begged you to come. I had my work displayed for the first time. Professors and collectors were there. You never showed. You sent Daniel instead, and he left after 10 minutes. Emily rolled her eyes. So what, you want a medal for being ignored? No, I said, my throat tight. I just want you to admit that this pattern exists. That I have been invisible to you, unless I could serve a purpose. My father's eyes darkened. Enough. You're twisting history to make yourself look righteous. Families sacrifice for each other. You wouldn't understand because you have never sacrificed. The laugh slipped out of me, bitter and raw. Never sacrificed. Every achievement I made was a sacrifice you demanded I downplay so Emily could shine brighter. Every step I took away from Boston was because you made it clear there was no place for me here. The room pulsed with tension. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Emily, who sat stiff, lips pressed tight. My mother finally opened her mouth, but before she could speak, my phone rang. I glanced down. The name on the screen froze me. Aunt Valerie. I hesitated, then answered. Hello, Clara. Her voice was steady, older but strong. I heard you were back in Boston. I thought you should know something. I stepped out into the hallway, my family's muffled voices still clinging to me like smoke. What is it, Aunt Valerie? She paused. I know what it feels like to be erased. To fight for recognition in this family and never get it. Your father won't tell you, but it happened before him too. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you mean? Our father, your grandfather, favored Robert from the moment he was born. He got the best schools, the praise, the money. The rest of us, me, your uncles, we were background. I left Boston because I could not breathe under that weight. And Robert, he learned it was normal. He grew up believing one child is chosen and the others are just shadows. My throat tightened. So this is not just about me. It never was, she said softly. It is a cycle. Passed down, unspoken but real. You feel it because you are living it. The hallways spun slightly. I pressed my hand against the wall. Why are you telling me this now? Because I see you standing where I once stood. And I need you to know it is not you who is broken. It is the pattern. And unless you end it, it will follow you the rest of your life. A silence stretched between us, heavy but clarifying. I swallowed. Thank you, Aunt Valerie. I hung up and stood there for a long moment, hearing the faint laughter of my siblings through the walls, the clink of a glass in my father's hand, my mother's quiet sigh. They were all locked inside the rhythm of something older than any of us, something that had kept me small and quiet for years. When I stepped back into the living room, their eyes lifted toward me. Who was that? My mother asked cautiously. Aunt Valerie, I answered, my voice even. My father's face hardened. You don't need to listen to her. She abandoned this family decades ago. No, I said firmly. She saved herself. Emily scoffed, but I didn't look at her. I looked directly at my father. This stops with me. I am not going to live my life begging for scraps of approval. I am not going to be the forgotten one anymore. The words surprised even me with their clarity. They rang in the air like a bell. For a moment no one spoke. The weight of generations pressed against me, but it no longer felt suffocating. It felt like something I had finally pushed off my shoulders. My father's mouth opened as if to argue, then closed again. My mother glanced away, her fingers knotting together in her lap. Emily's glare burned hot, but it did not reach me. I sat back down, my hands steady on my knees, and felt a strange calm settle over me. The circle had been drawn for decades, maybe longer. But I had stepped outside it, and for the first time I knew I would not step back in. When I boarded the train back to New York, the air felt different, as if Boston had finally loosened its grip on me. I watched the suburbs slip away, gray houses blurring into miles of track, and felt the weight in my chest lift with each passing station. By the time the skyline of Manhattan appeared on the horizon, glittering against the winter sky, I was breathing more freely than I had in years. The collective was waiting for me. I unlocked the heavy door with Harold's key and stepped into the cavernous loft that had already begun to feel like a second skin. Canvases leaned against the walls, long wooden tables scattered with sketches, models, laptops, and coffee cups. The air buzzed with an energy I had never known inside my family's house. Here people leaned in to listen, not to dismiss. Lucia waved me over from the center table where she was spreading out blueprints. James sat beside her, tapping his pen against the page as if mapping the city in his head. Clara, Lucia called, her voice warm. We were just waiting for you. I slipped off my coat and joined them. The three of us bent over the table, lines and color codes stretching across a map of the city's waterfront. It was a public design project, a chance to reimagine a forgotten pier into a living space of light and movement. James pointed to the sketches I had drafted the night before, his eyes bright. Your concept for the layered signage is brilliant. It gives people a sense of history without weighing down the present. Lucia nodded. Exactly. It is about memory and future living in the same space. That is what this city needs. Something stirred inside me, something steadier than the fragile hope I had carried for years. This was collaboration without rivalry. Recognition without guilt. Later that week, I sat across from Sophia in a quiet cafe near Union Square. She had mentored me since my earliest days at Vision and Company, guiding me through the sharp corners of the industry. She looked at me now with that same unwavering gaze. "So how does it feel finally winning what you wanted?" I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking against porcelain. "It feels different than I expected." Sophia leaned in. Different how I thought of the empty chairs at the Apex Awards, the silence on the other end of the phone when I had told my parents about my promotion years ago. I always thought recognition would heal that wound. That if I proved myself enough, they would finally see me. But now, I set the spoon down. I am starting to realize the victory is not about them. Sophia smiled, gentle and knowing. Real success, Clara, is when you stop needing to prove anything to the people who refuse to see you. It is when you define your own worth. Her words sank deep, and for once I did not feel defensive or desperate. I simply felt steady, as if the ground beneath me had shifted into something solid. Therapy was the next step I never expected to take. Caroline Foster's office was painted in calming shades of pale blue and gray, a soft chair angled toward a wide window. At first, I felt awkward sitting there with my hands folded, trying to explain decades of invisible wounds. "My parents prioritized Emily," I said on the second session. Over and over. I kept chasing their approval, but nothing was ever enough. Dr. Foster listened, her pen resting loosely in her hand. "And when you did achieve something, how did it feel?" "Like I had stolen it," I admitted quietly. "Like I was trespassing in my own life." She nodded. "That is what happens when boundaries are erased. You start believing you have to earn the right to exist." The word boundaries lingered. It was not something my family allowed. Boundaries meant disobedience. Boundaries meant you did not care enough. But, as the weeks passed, I began practicing them. I stopped answering calls at midnight. I said no when Emily tried to rope me into designing her new office space for free. I let the silence stand without rushing to fill it with apologies. One evening after a long day at the collective, I walked through the studio and paused to take it all in. Eleanor was on a call, her laughter echoing from the far corner. Kenji adjusted lighting on a scale model. Lucia and James debated over color palettes. I placed my sketchbook on my own desk, a space that belonged entirely to me, and felt something in my chest loosen. This was family too. Maybe not the kind bound by blood, but by choice, respect, and shared vision. The kind that cheered when you succeeded, not because it reflected on them, but because it mattered to you. Weeks turned into months. Our waterfront project gained attention, the city officials praising the innovation and heart in our design. There were late nights, empty pizza boxes stacked in corners, ink stains on my fingers. And yet, instead of exhaustion, I felt a kind of joy I had never known. One afternoon, while reviewing renderings with James, my phone buzzed with another call from Boston. I let it go to voicemail. I no longer felt the reflexive pull to answer, to fix, to prove. James glanced at me. "Not important," I smiled faintly. "Not anymore." That night, walking home through the glowing streets of Soho, I realized I was breathing differently. My shoulders were not braced for impact, my mind not circling the same old questions. For the first time, peace did not feel like a fragile thing I had to clutch desperately. It rested quietly in me, solid and warm. When I reached my apartment, the Apex trophy still gleamed on the shelf, its surface catching the city lights that streamed through my window. I touched it once, not as a plea for validation, but as a reminder of what I had built for myself. I no longer needed their applause. I turned away, exhaled softly, and let the silence of my own space settle around me, gentle and complete. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of my studio, catching the edges of sketches and models scattered across my desk. A year had passed since the Apex night, yet the memory still pulsed faintly in me, not as a wound, but as a marker of where the path had split. The collective had become my anchor. Each day was filled with collaboration, late-night brainstorms, the hum of printers running and paint smudges left behind on fingertips. It was a life that held me steady. Now the calendar had circled back to another awards season, this time at the Metropolitan Arts Center in Manhattan. Our waterfront restoration project, a design that blended light steel and community gardens, had been nominated for a major civic honor. The city had already started talking about it in newspapers, calling it a rare blend of practicality and poetry. I felt a nervous buzz in my chest, but it was different from the past. This was not about proving myself to those who had chosen to look away. This was about standing beside people who had chosen me. When the evening came, I slipped into a navy gown that Lucia had insisted I wear. She arrived at my door with her hair pinned high and eyes bright. James followed soon after, carrying a rolled-up plan under his arm in case anyone asked to see details. Kenji checked his watch, muttering about traffic, while Eleanor sipped a glass of water and smiled at us all like a patient guide. We moved together through the city streets, a small procession heading into the night. The Metropolitan Arts Center gleamed like a beacon. Its glass facade reflected the stream of taxis pulling up, the swirl of gowns and tuxedos entering beneath glittering lights. Inside, the hall stretched wide, filled to the edges with chatter and anticipation. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor as we entered, and I felt the press of energy around me. This time, no part of me expected empty chairs. I knew that when I looked to my side, the seats would be filled. We found our table near the front. Programs rested neatly on plates, champagne already poured. Around us, colleagues and city officials greeted one another, trading stories and laughter. I sat between Lucia and James, their shoulders brushing mine, and when I glanced down the row, I caught Kenji waving at someone across the room and Eleanor leaning back with that calm smile of hers. I exhaled slowly, letting myself feel the steadiness of belonging. The ceremony began with music rising from the stage. Awards were called in order, each recipient stepping forward to applause. I listened, clapped, smiled, and waited. My chest tightened only when the announcer's voice shifted to our category. The screen behind him lit up with images of our waterfront design, the arches of steel glimmering beneath lights, children playing in the gardens, water shimmering along the edge. Hearing the applause swell for something we had built together stirred something deep in me. When our project was named the winner, the room erupted. We rose as one, the five of us, and walked to the stage. I could feel the heat of the lights, the weight of the moment, but it did not feel heavy. Standing there, trophy in hand once again, I realized the difference. Last year, I had clutched an award like a lifeline, desperate for it to be proof to my family. Tonight, I held it lightly, a symbol of a shared triumph. After the photos were taken and the applause faded, the hall returned to its hum of celebration. People approached us, eager to shake hands, to ask questions, to congratulate. I spoke with strangers who already seemed like future collaborators. The night glowed with possibility. Yet near the edge of the room, I noticed a figure who did not glow. A young woman stood half in shadow, her dress simple compared to the others, her program folded so tightly it looked like it might tear. She held a certificate against her chest but kept her gaze lowered as people brushed past without stopping. Something in her posture pulled me across the room. I stopped a few feet away and asked gently if it was her first time here. She startled, then nodded. "They gave me an emerging designer award," she said quietly. "But no one came with me. My parents told me it was just a waste of time. I thought it would feel different." Her words pierced me. I remembered the way silence had filled the row of empty chairs when I stood alone. I remembered the way I had once prayed for someone to clap, not because they had to, but because they believed in me. I reached into my clutch and drew out a small brass key. Harold's spare, the one he had given me for the collective, had sat unused at the bottom of a drawer for months. I pressed it into her hand. "What is this?" she whispered, eyes wide. "A door," I said softly. "A place where people will see you. Come by when you are ready." Her fingers closed around it, knuckles, white eyes filling with something fragile and bright. She did not speak, only nodded as if afraid words might break the moment. I smiled and left her with the key burning gold in her hand. Hours later, back in my apartment, I set the new Civic Award beside the Apex trophy on the shelf by the window. They gleamed together in the city light. For a long time, I had thought the apex was a reminder of what I had lost. Now I saw it as the beginning of what I had found. It had been the door Harold opened, the step that led me to the collective, to therapy, to boundaries, to friendships that felt like family. I touched both trophies once, then drew my hand away. The objects themselves were just metal and glass. What mattered was the life they had unlocked, the warmth they had carried me toward. As the city stretched outside my window, alive and endless, I understood that the real family is not always the one you are born into. Sometimes it is the one you find in unexpected places, with people who choose you without condition. Have you ever found a true family in a place you never expected? Share your story.